Give me a second. Yeah, thanks so much, Chris. Boy, I learned a lot about your work and your process, and I appreciated hearing it. Um, I have some questions, but I want to open the floor to other people if other people have questions first. Does anybody have anything they want to ask? Okay, then I'm going to jump in. I have a couple of comments first. When you first showed us the studio, my first impression, this feels like the Rothko Chapel. And I've never been in the Rothko Chapel, but I've seen pictures of it. It looks so meditative, and that was the first thing that came to me was like, oh my God, it feels very meditative. So
I love that.
We have a special studio.
Thank you.
And then another observation, you said early on that you stay away from colors like blue and green and red. And it's funny because I love your work. I've seen your work a lot. It never occurred to me that you don't use those other colors. Yeah. And I think because you kind of create your own kind of color in your work, that makes sense, so that you don't need those other colors. I mean, that's my impression. That's what I think of what's going on. But it's funny. It's like, oh wow, she doesn't. She doesn't use those other colors. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
It's true. I don't. Yeah. But you're right. No. I do use value a lot to create a lot of depth. So my work is colorful. It's just not across the spectrum of colors. Yeah.
I think that's a good way to describe it. It's colorful, but not in the way that most people think of it. So, yes, I'm really kind of curious about the way you work with layers. I know with painters, it's different than like working for a photographer working in Photoshop because the layers are very specific. But do you have like any kind of idea of like how many layers you could put down on a piece before you feel like you're done with it?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I really loved from the beginning, I really loved watercolor work, which if any of you are familiar with it, it's not really a layered work. It's very clean by virtue of what's required by the medium. And for example, one of my favorite artists is Julius Bissier and his watercolor pieces. If you know them at all, if you don't, look them up. They're really beautiful. I have some hanging in my home, actually. But what I loved about them was the simpleness of just a single layer of paint and it creating so much beauty on a canvas or a page. So I really have always struggled with creating layers. Like I actually want to not be doing more layers. I fight it. It's a struggle for me. I want to be able to create this work that's very simple and reflects what I see as the simplicity of the inspiration that I'm, painting about. But it doesn't work that way. As I start to lay something down, a layer can be created pretty quickly. And so, and then as you go through the painting process, and I have moments where I hate my work, and I just, oh my God, this is the worst piece I've ever created. And then I have to cover it up, and so, and I'm sure it's never going to get right. And then the next day in the studio, wow, that's a pretty good mark. And where can I go with that? And I'm good again. So paintings can have many, many layers, but in truth, if you ask me what my favorite work is, it's some of those raw canvas pieces where I really had to stop. There was no layering on those pieces other than the clear gesso on the canvas, which you could see through, and then the oil marks, right? I love that because it just harkens to that watercolor-esque kind of thing where it's just a stroke of paint that has so much beauty. Again, it's something about the simplicity for me that really drives me. So yes, I use many layers sometimes, but it's not something I not something I profess to like. And it's also not something that I think has to be there to be successful. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I noticed some of your pieces have like a kind of a beige background. So do you put down a layer of paint and start working on that? Is that
Well, it may be the pieces that I'm referring to as raw canvas, where it's literally the canvas showing through the clear gesso. But there are some pieces like one you showed that was really more beige. And in that case, it's gesso with some paint added to it to create that color typically. You know, a lot of times because I'm painting over things, you know, I'm like, oh, I've made this mark. I don't like it. I want to get rid of it. And I don't think to preserve it in some way. What I'm thinking about when I'm doing that is how can I hide it? And so then I'll take some gesso that's got mixed with paint on my palette, and or I'll take some paint, but more often not oil paint, because oil paint isn't something that's going to allow me to cover it quickly and move on to the next step. So I'll take some gesso, I'll put some acrylic paint and I'll cover it up. And then you know, it dries pretty quickly. And then sometimes the layers are showing through, sometimes they're not. It just depends on what's going on. But that's what allows me to kind of move forward in the art. And then of course that's creating a layer as well. And so that beige color on some of those pieces is created that way. It's gesso with acrylic paint in it.
So I have a question about that. Do you paint, and I guess I probably can guess the answer to this, because I paint a lot of things flat on the floor because I use a lot of turpentine with oil paint, and I, so in terms of layers like that, and I'm not a big person. I don't like drips all that much. It's, you know, just something I don't like. But do you paint on the vertically? Is it thick enough that you do that way, or do you ever put it down on the floor?
I paint a lot on the floor, Peter, and also vertically. It's really random as to when I do what. In fact, sometimes one painting during the studio day will be up and down and up and down, depending on sort of where I am, where I want to get on that, what kind of experience I want to see happening with the paint. You know, I keep my mineral spirits in a spray bottle, so I achieve a lot of effect with that. And I'm not always a drip person either. I mean, there's some dripping that kind of works for me, but I'm not a big, you know, dripping paint person like a lot of people are. But I do like the effects of thinning out the paint and doing, you know, other things with it. So sometimes that's better vertical. Sometimes it's better on the ground, like you said. And so, yeah, I do both. I do both all the time. One piece will many ways.
The other similar question, which it goes back to the layering and putting stuff. Have you used cold wax with oil?
You know,
have you tried?
I haven't tried cold wax, and the reason I haven't is probably my own, a little bit of my own fear. And it is this, from this perspective, I've been afraid to play with it because because my canvases are so large. I roll canvases to ship them a lot. And I've been really nervous that if I use cold wax, I'll end up with cracking that I can't tolerate. And so I haven't really messed with it very much.
Try it, because I don't think that would happen. And it depends on, because you mix it the same way. You can make it more, but you can make more, put more cold wax into it or less. And it depends on how you apply it. I think maybe with encaustics, which is hot wax, you might have, that might be more of an issue because it would crackle. But my experience, because I have never tried rolling one up, but I don't think it would work. But it's fun to play with, and it gives you the tactile. It's just a lot. It's buttery is the best way I can describe it.
No,
mix it together, and it gives you a kind of opacity that you can't get necessarily completely as much, more than you can just with the paint. So
yeah, absolutely. It's sort of matte kind of opacity. And I know that when I'm fearful about something and I'm resisting it, that probably means I should try it, because I'll end up really loving it. I've discovered that about myself. So I probably should try it. Well, I'll put it on the list for the new studio.
Okay. Yeah, I think you'll like it. Try it.
You know, and you have the ability with cold wax, not that I'm any expert with it at all, but you can apply it in thinner layers. And so that might help you, Chris, in terms of concern.
Yeah. I'll start to play with it. You guys are all going to get credit for that inspiration. I'll start to play with it.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing you never know what you're gonna do. It just,
Right.
it'll, might take you in a completely different direction, but you're
Yeah,
like,
no, it might, absolutely.
Go ahead, Ann.
When you were saying about some of the paperworks, and you said you make your own collage paper and then collage it, what did you mean by that? I mean, do you make paper like when people shred all this stuff and glue it, or are you talking about some other kind of a process?
Yeah, so, and I'm probably giving it, making it sound more, fancy than it really is, um, but a couple of things. One is I have this affinity for Whole Foods grocery store bags. I just think the sort of combination of umber and sienna that they are, I can't repeat. I cannot make a paint color that matches Whole Foods grocery store bags. So I literally cut those up and use those on the painting sometimes. And so that's really not fancy. And what I do is I just take clear gesso and acrylic, high gloss acrylic gel, medium, golden acrylic gel medium, and put it over top of it, which will make it even a tiny bit darker, and it's pretty awesome on the painting. But when I referred to making paper, what I really was talking about was there's a process. I'm sure you've probably done it. You might have done it like in craft school, right? Like this is not, again, not a fancy process, but where you take tissue paper, you can take any color tissue paper, put it on a, plastic bag, a garbage bag on your floor. And you can put a combination of paint and acrylic medium on it. And it will, it will become plasticky, like, that's the way to explain it, such that you can then use it like a paper onto your canvas or onto whatever you're working with. And it's really makes a really interesting kind of collage paper when you pull it apart, after it's dry. And so that is primarily what that black is. I have had a really hard time painting with black. I love black. In fact, I have it all over my house. I wear it. I'm not opposed to it in any way. But for some reason, I have a really hard time putting it on my paintings and balancing its energy on the painting. And maybe it's because of the colors of the rest of my palette. I don't know. But when I use the black collage paper, I feel really comfortable with it. And I really like how it came out, and it didn't feel like it was unbalanced. So I had that's one of those reasons why those shark pieces have a lot of black in them, because it really worked for me there. But I don't find it easy to work with otherwise. So,
just a quick comment. Have you tried the wet strength tissue? Because
no.
that lends itself. Yeah, you can. And I'm happy to DM you with the source.
I thought that'd be great.
Amazon.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Basically, it's more durable, especially when you apply the paint. But it's the benefit of tissue.
Yeah. Okay. No, I'll try that. I'll try that, Sue. Thank you. Thank you.
Another question. You mentioned music, and I mean, I listen to music a lot when I'm working. I know music can be kind of personal, but I'm just kind of curious, what kind of music do you like? And if you don't want to go into that, I totally understand.
I don't think you can probably hear it, but playing in the studio right now is just some very meditative kind of piano music. And I do a lot of that, like sort of spa music, in the background, just sometimes just something to kind of have a noise that's not really distracting. Almost all the paper pieces were inspired by some Patty Griffin songs. She's a vocalist, and if you don't know her work, you may or may not like her voice, but she's got
Die in Florida.
Yeah. She's got really great lyrics, right? And so I really can tune into her words and her lyrics. They're very, very artistic and very poetic. So I'll do that kind of music as well. And then, I listen to all the pop stuff all the time, pop and country and, whatever people listen to, but mostly in the studio, it stays pretty peaceful or vocally like that seems kind of meaningful in my brain mostly. So.
Cool.
No AC/DC for me in the studio.
I also have a couple questions about your business.
Yeah.
So you have 6 galleries. How do you decide what to send to which gallery? Do you have some kind of agreement with them, or does one gallery get a particular series and another gallery gets a different one? Does one gallery works on paper, another one gets oiled? I mean, how do you do
How do I decide? Yeah. Well, so with the exception of paper, let's talk about canvas. I really just am creating all the time, you know, and I'm not saying, oh, today I'm going to create a wire piece or today I'm going to create a concrete piece. I'm just creating all the time. And sometimes there's wire and sometimes there's concrete, and whatever gets created. And so when I've got 8 or 9 pieces created, then I'll look at my galleries and say, okay, well, who needs work right now? You know, based on who's selling what. And so, you know, like if it's Huff Harrington, Atlanta, I'll write them a note and I'll say, hey folks, I've got some new pieces. Do you want to review them? I set up a page on my website that has a password protection. And so I'll put up all my new pieces on that password protected page. I send that link to my gallery. They can look at them and they can choose whatever they want. Let's say I have 10 pieces and they choose 5. Then great, I get those pieces ready and I ship them out to them. And then the 5 that are left, again, I'm still painting more, you know, as I'm going through this process in the background. So it's always kind of happening. But then I'll go to the next gallery that needs them. And what has sort of happened over time is that my galleries are kind of on a rotation. Like, it's funny, as I moved, because I had to really shut down and stop painting in middle of October so that I could get everything packed. Every gallery was stocked except for one, the gallery in Birmingham that I work with. And now Birmingham has sold almost all of the pieces they had. So she's going to be first to review the new work from here, because everybody else sort of got pieces more recently. And so they'll have to wait their turn, right? So it's really just, it's sort of like inventory management, right? You just kind of get into this natural cycle. But what I do is, as I create them, I make them for review and let the galleries choose what they want. And they really, some of them like certain pieces more than others. You know, you can sort of get a feel for what they like. And then the paper pieces, although they're not exclusive to Atlanta, my Atlanta gallery has had tremendous success with them. So I'm pretty focused on the paper pieces going to Atlanta because it works for them really well.
So you look at canvases and send them. So I'm guessing the gallery then does the stretching and framing?
Yeah, I've done a couple of different things over the time. I've, you know, stretched them here, and I'm a good stretcher. I like to stretch. I don't have any heartburn with that. I've stretched them in my own gallery and shipped them depending on what size they are. I've had them driven by freight, you know, all these things. Shipping is the biggest expense you could have, right? But it is what it is. What I found, though, is that most of my galleries have a situation where they have an art gallery nearby that I can ship my work to, will stretch the pieces, and then either deliver them or the gallery will pick them up. And so that has worked very well and been a very easy way, especially with bigger work. And then, you know, my expense is less because you're shipping a piece rolled, and then the re-stretching of it is usually not very expensive either. So it's been a lot more economical than shipping a stretched piece, you know, to another state.
Does the gallery charge you when they stretch it?
Yes. So what my galleries do typically is they'll go to the art gallery, pick up the framed work and pay for it, and then just deduct it from my commission when the piece sells. So, okay. Yeah.
Actually, okay, to ask a question, or okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know whether it was free form or not. So Chris, do you feel, because you have to supply artwork to so many different galleries, does the pressure of having to produce affect your creative flow and process?
You know, it doesn't, because I am just painting at this point for me. And if some pieces accumulate and somebody wants them, great, right? But I don't like it. I guess I'm in a cycle now where there's enough inventory that it would be unlikely that somebody would be out and be like, Chris, come on, get it done, get some pieces done, right? If that was the situation, I'd probably feel pressure. But I mean, there's enough rotation that I don't ever feel like they're really pressure for me to get done. I know that I'm just working, and that as pieces get done, someone will want them, and that's fantastic, right? But so I guess the answer, Sue, is no, but only because nobody runs out completely and there's no huge pressure on me. If it ever got to be that way, I think I would do something different. I wouldn't be, I mean, you know, I would set up a different situation, because I don't want to feel pressure in the gallery. I want to paint for me, and you know, yeah.
Interesting, because that was always my concern, that with galleries, that's a wonderful relationship to have. But I didn't know whether you'd feel too much pressure to have to produce and supply X number of pieces, you know, every 6 months.
Yeah, it just doesn't work out that way for me, that I feel that way. And people, the galleries are really pretty patient. Like, they want you to be creative, and they want you to take your time. So, and because they want good work, right? And they want it to sell. So, you know, I'll tell people, hey, I'm working on a new body of work. It's going to be a few weeks, but I'll reach out soon, you know, and, you know, they're great, you know, they all know that I've got other galleries. So they all know that I'm kind of rotating around, and they want to work with me. So yeah, no, I have just not felt the pressure. I understand how it could be there, but I haven't felt it.
Thank you.
I have the other thing is, I have really good relationships with all of them, and that really makes a difference, right? So it's all about that, you know, and communicating with them a lot. So I do that.
So Chris, it sounds like you have a great inventory system set up, but I came across it about a year ago, and I've started to use it, and I really like it. It's called Artwork Archive. Have you ever heard of it?
That's what I use. No, that's what I use. Yeah.
It's such a great tool, because you know where you just, so I was going, gee, I wonder if you invented that yourself, because Artwork Archive is so terrific. I mean, you take it to, you know where stuff is. Somebody, you want to send a proposal, you do those private rooms. That's it's absolutely the best.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Yep. You and I are alike on that. Yep.
And I think as I've approached galleries, when I show them, when I say, oh, they like that too, because it's easy for them, right? It's all the information is in one place, and it's if you need something, you can do it. So,
you know, I've gotten great feedback from all of my galleries about the professionalism of my business side of my art. So much so that I feel that there must be a lot of artists that don't take that side very seriously, because I'm always so surprised when someone comments about it. So, you know, it seems like a really important thing, because you're making their job easier, and then they can spend more time selling your work, right? I guess that's the thinking I have about it. So.
Do you photograph all the work yourself? That's a challenge for me.
I do. You know, I realized, you know, years and years ago that, like, somehow I was going to have to get this darn work photographed, right? And I couldn't be hiring a photographer every 6 weeks. I mean, it just wasn't going to work. So I always had a nice camera. I never actually really used it very much. I just had this nice camera laying around. So I got myself a tripod for the camera. And in my old studio in Virginia, I didn't have nearly the kind of light quality I have here. But in Virginia, I literally got two, I'm sure you've seen them. They're tripods with like a spotlight on them, you know, like an adjustable tripod with a spotlight on the top. And I use these all the time. Two big daylight bulbs from Home Depot. You know, they're the big, you know, 5,000 Kelvin or whatever they are, big fat bulbs. They're expensive. They're like $20 a piece. And I put those in the spotlights, shine them on the artwork, take my picture, do a tiny bit of post-processing in the Lightroom application, just to, you know, clean it up a little bit, maybe adjust the white balance a little bit. And that's it, I'm done. And so it's a really easy process. I don't do anything more fancy than that. And now that I'm used to it, it comes really quickly, right? A lot of people, I have a friend artist who's a friend of mine who's an artist who's in Richmond, Virginia. She uses her cell phone exclusively. I couldn't take a good photograph with my cell phone to save my soul. So, you know, it's all about what you get used to, right? But my good camera finally has a use, and that's what I use it for.
I want to ask you another question. Before you even said you didn't do art fairs, I was thinking about the Miami Art Fair because that's such a huge thing. I'm curious why you don't do art fairs, because I would think that your work would do really well. I mean, because you don't need to with your gallery.
No, well, and so let me just clarify, because if I was ever you know, at Art Basel in Miami, you know, most of the artists there are being brought there by the galleries that represent them. And if and it's the galleries that own the spaces in Art Basel for the presentation. So if that occurred, I would definitely be in the art fair, but I don't do them myself. And it's not because I don't need to. It's not even because of the work involved. It's sort of that I believe, whether this is true or not, I'm not totally sure. But what I believe is that it's a very separate path from being represented by galleries. You're kind of going down this path of becoming available in a different way. There's nothing wrong with it. And I have many artist friends who are super successful at art fairs. But I want to be a little more exclusive than that. And I don't, and also part of me doesn't want to work that hard. That's a really hard job to go to an art fair and sell your work and get it all there and, you know, the whole thing. So I just decided that it was better for me, and since I had been successful with a gallery model, to pursue that path. And that's the way I've stayed. So that's really why it's just sort of a personal choice thing. But I feel like it's really people that do art fairs, you know, and do them really well. It's its own thing. It's kind of a separate path. Doesn't mean they don't come back and do galleries as well. It's just definitely a separate path from my perspective.
Would you ever just go just to see what other people are doing?
Absolutely. No, I enjoy looking at art, so for sure. So I go to art fairs all the time. Yeah. In fact, I go over to Miami all the time, and I love to go to a gallery I'm not in and see what other artists are up to. You know, it's fantastic. It's like Instagram, but better, right? You know.
And I'm also curious, what artists influence you? I mean, do you think about other artists when you're creating work? And not that you try to emulate them, but are there other artists that really kind of are in the back of your mind when you're creating?
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier, Julius Bissier. He's just probably my, you know, one of my biggest influences, maybe. I certainly of sort of the, you know, kind of master like artists. I love all the great masters, obviously, right? But I have two favorite, you know, living artists, and they influence me a lot, not in terms of my work so much, but they influence me in my work because I want to sort of achieve what I feel they have achieved, right? And so one of them, and I love their work. That's really the most important part. One of them is Yunmei Lee. She's a gorgeous abstractionist. And then Gary Kamaran, who you probably all know, just a fun, amazing abstractionist as well. So those two people in particular, I really die for their work. I just think it's fantastic, right? And so they influence me in that I would like to feel like I was operating at their level, I think.
Mind spelling their names?
Sure. Yunmei Lee is Hyunmee, last name Lee, Lee. And her website is yunmeilee.com. Her work is really extraordinary. And then Gary Kamaran is Gary, obviously. Kamaran is Komarin.
You just had an exhibit in the UK with Motherwell. It's like,
Yeah.
woohoo.
Oh yeah, I mean he's one of the New York artists, right? You know, I mean he's sort of, you know, trained by Gaston, and you know, just like he's an incredible talent. Yeah. Really
You work with interior design. For some reason I thought you worked with interior designers, maybe through the galleries.
A lot. Well, so no, I do work with them directly. So I work with a lot of interior designers directly. They come to me directly, right? But I just don't sell on my website publicly. It's that there's private transactions going on in the background. But yeah, no, I've done a lot of work with them. I have a couple, one in Texas that I work with all the time. Dana Walters in Birmingham. There's a couple that have bought quite a few pieces from me, and that's a lot of fun. I actually don't do commission work for the general public because I've found it to be too much of a process where you have to think about what you're doing. And I want to be more intuitive than that. But I will do commissions for the interior designers because they are much more open to, okay, Chris, we just need a piece that's 5 feet by 5 feet in, you know, mostly in this color palette. You go for it, you know, and so I can work in that kind of way. So I do some commissions for the interior design side of the world.
Yeah, that seems like it would be an appealing relationship.
It is. Yeah, it's great.
They're visual people too,
Yeah,
you know.
no, they are. They're artists in their own right. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions?
I don't.
Okay, well, I think we'll wind it up. Chris, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this immensely, and I
Thank you.
appreciate your willingness to participate.
Thank you so much for spending your afternoon with me and for interacting with me. This was my favorite part, actually, was getting to talk to you all. So do more of this, Alan and Peter. Do more of this. Yeah, this was really good.
It always is. It's always great to talk to other artists and see what they're doing and ask them some questions here. Because that's the whole idea of having relationships on Instagram anyway, is you meet people. And all of us have met lots of people that way. But this is even better because then it's like, you can actually say, well, what about this? Or have you done that? And it's also a great way to learn stuff and share ideas. So it's thank you so much.
Well, I hope to see you all on social media and other places. Come to Florida.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for participating.
Yeah.
Okay, have a great weekend.